Hi everyone, welcome back to another scrapbooking process video. Today I'm using the Happy Home Kit to create a warm, cozy layout featuring lots of layered goodness. I'm also diving into the adorable little potted plant dies, which are available as an add-on for this kit. And these are so fun to work with. I have pulled out the little brushes that I use for blending my distress oxides. So I'm going to pick a couple of colors here that work with the layout that I plan to make. And I'm going to show you how I turn these into some custom embellishments using ink as well as markers with a super simple coloring technique that adds a lovely pop of details to your page. I've pulled out my Cuddle Kid, which is a small die cut machine, and these are very handy to have. I do like using my Big Shot for most of my larger die cutting needs, but it is very nice to have a little small one that doesn't take up so much space on your desk because so many times we don't really need all of that big cutting surface. And so whenever I have tiny dies like this, I like to use my Cuddle Kid. I happened to get this one at Michael's for a very low price. I think they were $4 each. I got two of them when they were going out of when the Cuttlebug people stopped making them. Provocraft, I think, was the company that made those. So as you can see, I am laying out the leaves on the green cardstock that came in the kit, and I'm laying out all of the pots on the coral colored cardstock in the kit. And all I took were very small strips of 3 of the different kinds of cardstock. There was also white cardstock in this kit, but I didn't need it for today's die cutting purposes. So here I have one each of the pots and one each of the green pieces of foliage. And now I'm also going to make some of my pots out of the craft colored cardstock as well. So right now I have double of everything. And I've just decided to collect my little pieces of die cut shapes in a little valet tray there. And I'm using the washi tape that came in the kit. There's so much washi tape on these rolls that I don't really worry too much about. I don't really consider it wasting to use a little bit of what's on hand for this. There's so much there that I don't think I'll ever be able to use it all, although I guess it would be nice if I could. Now, here is a moment where I think I'm going to use my sticky mat, and then I remembered from the last time that I tried to use my sticky mat with paper that it really doesn't stick to paper. It's great for stencils, but it's not great for just paper that you're going to be inking. So I removed my grid mat, and underneath of my grid mat, I keep a piece of silicone. This is a silicone mat that I bought from Amazon. It's very large. It's about the same size as my mat. So that would be about 24, 25 inches wide by about 18 or 19 inches tall. And my silicone mat does two things. It holds my grid mat in place so it's not sliding around on my melamine table, but also it provides a really nice inking surface. So I I like being able to just move my grid mat and underneath there's already a silicone mat. I don't have to figure out where to store it or what to do with it when it's not in use or make room for it on my table. It's just always there. I am taking a couple of colors here of Distress Oxide. So the orangey color that I'm using is actually Candied Apple, which I did not realize would be orange until I looked at my brushes. Now, these little tiny brushes, I cannot remember where I got them. Some of my patrons were asking me, and I might have gotten them on either Amazon or Temu or something like that. And we are sourcing them out to carry them in the store for an upcoming mixed media kit. So keep an eye on our shop if you'd like to get some of these little tiny brushes. They're very handy for these sorts of things. In fact, these are really the only blending brushes that I use because I rarely do bigger projects than just piecing together little die cuts. So I have one for each color of Distress Oxide that I have. I don't have all of the colors, but I have a nice little assortment. So I have them, I keep them in that bowl or in that mug that you saw. And I actually find that these brushes are serving an unusual purpose that I didn't realize would be helpful. And that is they make a really good swatch sample for the colors because It's really hard to tell what color these inks are based on either the packaging that they come in, so the label that the manufacturer puts on them, but also the little labels that I got from the Tim Holtz website. When I printed them up, they really don't look the right color at all. So this is a really great way for me to pick which colors, and I have little labels on each of the brushes, so I know which color is which goes with which brush. So sometimes even if I'm not going to use the brushes, I'll still use the brushes to pick the colors, find the color names, and then go get the colors. So I'm almost using them as a little swatch pad, but it's just in a cup instead of on a little ring. So as you can see, I used my little brushes to put shading on each of those. When I was shading the plant pots, I just put a little bit of shading on each side and left the center plain. So that way it looks basically like there's a bit of a highlight down the center, as you can see there, where it's not inked. And I did ink the leaves as well. They have a very slight inking on them. And for these ones, I inked them so much that it changed the color of them. I didn't want all of my plant leaves to be exactly the same color. So I used some, I believe I used Mowed Lawn and Lucky Clover were the two different shades of green that I used there. And now I'm just using my Art Glitter Designs Designer Series Dries Clear glue. And I'm just, gluing these together so that the little bits of leaves look like they're inside of the pots. Now, one of those pots has a little back on it, like the inside surface of the pot, and so I'm using that on one of them, but the other one, the plant actually filled the pot so much that I didn't need to use it. So now I have that little set of embellishments. As you can see, they're right there, and I've printed up a number of different houseplant related photos here, telling some backstories that I didn't get a chance to tell the first time around, pulling out some older photos and maybe some smaller stories because I think that they work really well with this kit that has lots of little house plants and furniture and that sort of thing. I decided that these were looking just a little bit too plain, so I took my Stampin' Up! Markers and I picked a selection of greens there, and I'm just taking a dark green, and I actually don't like what I did there. I got some of the marker on the pot, so this ends up not being my favorite, but I take one pen and one marker, and I just use the brush tip, and all that I'm doing here is I'm just swooshing it out, so I'm just making these little wispy brush marks just to add a little bit of dimension to the plants. And I did that based on looking at the sticker sheet. The sticker sheet had some shading on the plants in that, so I decided to just replicate that. Now in this one, I'm going to like it a little bit better. And I'm going in with a second color and adding just a little bit more depth and dimension on, especially on that thicker piece of greenery. It needs a little bit more dimension. And some of the less thick ones stand well on their own without extra colors on them. So now that I've finished those, I'm just going to place them back in the little valet tray that I had them in. And now I'm going to design my page. And I'm going to start by selecting a background. So I have all of these papers. I've created 2 layouts with this kit already. And so I do have lots and lots left to work with here. And I'm just trying to decide. I know that I want to use that paper right there, the pattern paper with all the household items all over it. That has a real Pink Fresh Studio feel to me, even though it is from Echo Park. I just love the modern, crisp, cool feel of it. I really hope that Echo Park continues to bring us some of these beautiful modern designs because I love them. So I am going to use this as my background. This is actually the backside of one of the florals from the Simple Stories collection. I believe it's from the Simple Stories collection. And I'm going to take a vertical half of this, and it's actually, so what I want to do here is put a little contrasting piece of paper on the right-hand side of this and maybe use a border punch or something. But I realized that I actually had too much of it. It was too wide. I wanted it to be definitely less than half. So I cut it so that it's actually just over 4 inches wide. And then I cut another strip of this paper. And this is a really nice tone on tone coral orangey kind of paper. Maybe looks a little bit terracotta-ish. And I am going to use a border punch on this. This is my double embossed dotted lace punch, which is my favorite punch. I go to this one all the time. And I don't even mind that I go to it all the time. Sometimes I think, oh, I should mix it up and use something different. But I just love this one so much. So why would I use anything different, right? I mean, there are times when I don't want something rounded. And when that's the case, I usually use my notebook paper punch, which I also pulled out for this layout. And you'll see it on the next layout. Now, this paper was just looking a little bit too plain, and so I decided to add a little bit of dimension. I already had this, again, it's the candied apple, but it does have this corally look to it. I know there's another distress color. It's a more new color that's coral. I forget what it's called. I don't have that color, so I'm just using this candied apple. It's close enough to coral for me, and I really like how it looks there. Now it is looking just a tiny bit bright, and my goal here is not to make this scallop stand out a whole lot. So just to tone down the redness of the candied apple, I'm just going over it with a very light layer of frayed burlap, which is the only brown that I have for Distress Oxide. I have a couple more brown Distress inks, but I don't find I use my inks, my plain Distress inks very often. I typically reach for my oxides. I'm just going to place my grid mat back down. And again, it's so handy having that silicone mat right underneath. I've been storing it that way for a couple of years, and it really is working well for me. So I'm going to use my grid mat here to help me align this, although even though I did that, it still is crooked, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, as I always say. Sometimes I dwell more on those details and sometimes I let them go. It kind of depends on my mood. And in this case, I'm just letting it go today. Now, here's another thing I'm going to mess up and let go. So I'm matting this on a scrap piece of white cardstock. You can see a little bit of black showing through from the barcode on the other side of it is what I was just pointing out there. Now, when I cut this down, I basically I cut it off, and so off meaning completely off center. So it's sort of matted on white, but it's not very well matted on white. And again, I'm just deciding to let it go. I don't know how much layering I'm going to do or where my layering might go. So I thought I'd just move forward with it as it is and maybe try to make sure that some of my layering covers that. Or maybe I won't care about it as time goes by, or maybe I'll decide to fix it. So I'm being pretty open-minded about it. And I usually do that in my scrapbooking process. I just if I can't decide what to do, I'll usually just leave it and think on it. And it either nags at me and I decide to fix it, or it doesn't, and then I'm fine with it. I'm outlining just that pattern paper with the household stuff all over it with brown. And I think that just finishes off the paper and makes it look a little bit more pulled together. I did double matte that photo, so it's matted in the white, sort of. On one side, it doesn't look like it's matted at all. And it's also matted in craft. And there is a little chunk out of the craft paper that I was using. It was just a scrap. It wasn't the craft that came in this kit. I'm just playing around with how I might want to embellish this little plant. I might put a little piece of wood veneer on it, is what I'm thinking. And I'm going to, I think that this plant is going to look really nice right there. And I'm going to put some lines on my photo right there as well. And I thought I'd take two more of the plants and put them either at the bottom or at the top. At the top gives me a bit more balance because at the bottom, they're too close to the other plant. So I'm going to make a little ledge up there for my plants to sit on. I didn't want them just hanging there in space, which would have been okay, but for me, it was bugging me, so I wanted to put them on a little ledge. So I cut that little strip of yellow paper, and you're going to see me make a mistake with that yellow paper in a few minutes. But it's more of a learning a lesson with the yellow paper than necessarily a mistake. I kind of knew it might not work out. Now I'm going to cut a layer here and I'm just tearing it with my ruler. This is this beautiful golden colored paper and I just love it. It's one of the pattern papers in the kit. Then I'm also layering it with a very tiny amount of this beautiful green floral. Ugh, I just love that so much. I'm going to take more of a horizontal strip of this yellow paper. That'll give me a little bit of balance from all of the verticality that's going on this page. We've got vertical lines on the background and then the photo is fairly vertical and then lots of layered vertical pieces. So I needed some horizontal. So I have this yellow, and then I also grabbed a piece from the bag that I think the cardstock add-on and the pattern paper add-on both came in those bags. So if you got our kits and some add-ons, you'll have a couple of those. Definitely hang on to them. They're really great for layering. Just going to close that bag because I did pull both layers of it, so I don't want it flopping around on me. And you could close that bag such that you've got a pocket to stick a tag in, but I'm not going to put a tag on this one because I know that my journaling is going to go in on the photo. And I love how the plant looks with all of the little bits of soil all over the table, and that's going to give me a nice place because it kind of goes from lots of soil to little bits of soil, and it's mostly white at the bottom. So that mostly white part gives me a really great place to put my journaling lines. And the story behind this one is that this is a plant that I used to keep on my desk here where I work, right in front of me. And my cat kept pulling the plant out of the pot, and it's a plant that doesn't have very deep roots. So it comes out really easily, and it was still alive. In fact, it was thriving despite the fact that my cat had done that multiple times. Now here I just took a little scrap of this pink or coral colored paper and I punched it with my notebook paper punch. I'm taking that candied apple ink once more to add a little bit of contrast to the edges to make those edges stand out a little bit. And I used a fairly light hand with that so that I didn't have to go back with the frayed burlap this time. It wasn't such a bright orangey reddish looking color to it. I'm just going to tuck that in to break up some of that yellow. And I'm just talking about my little stubby brushes because some of my tiaras over on Patreon were asking about them. So I'm just explaining them and talking about how I printed up the little tiny labels that you put on your little ink pads, the little tiny square ones. And Tim Holtz over on his website has labels that you can make for your full size or your mini ink pads. I printed those up and cut them out. I just printed them on a full sheet of sticker paper, cut them out and put them on my brushes. Now I'm going to move on and do my journaling. I'm going to use my journaling template here to write out some lines. I'm using my Sharpie pen, and you can write on photos, is what I'm trying to say. You can write on photos with most regular felt tip pens, and it doesn't bleed or smudge or anything, so you can feel free. You don't have to use a slick surface writer to mark on a photo. I'm just showing different options for markers because I drew the lines in black, so I wanted my journaling to be in a different color. So I decided to do the journaling in the brown, even though that brown, I kind of wish I had done it differently because the brown marker is a fairly thick marker and it's going to be harder to print in a neat way with such a thick marker, but I will do it anyways. My journaling here says, Karma loves to make messes, grabbing this plant and placing it on my desk. Poor plant doesn't seem to mind. Now, I did move my plant since this because I felt kind of badly for the plant. I felt like at some point it was going to start not thriving, but it actually did better for a while after my cat was doing this to it. I don't know if it stimulated something or made it kind of try harder to live, to survive the trauma, but anyhow, it became really beautiful and full after that. But it's up on my shelf now, and my cat can no longer get at it. I am adding some strips of foam here. This is just foam that I have that I used on another project. This is a recent card that I did, not a card, but it's a shaker element that I used on a layout that I did a couple weeks ago. And rather than allowing that that nice little foam to go to waste, I'm just cutting it into little pieces and sticking it in between my layers. So this is what I'm doing instead of using foam dots. I have my Stampin' Up! Foam adhesive over there to the left-hand side, but I ended up really not needing to use it. So here's where I'm going to make a mistake. I've never used these brushes as I would have used a finger dauber. So usually when I'm inking the edges of a small little piece, I hold it in my hand. I use my ink daubers and I just kind of ink the edges. Now, so here I'm just trying to do it without pulling out any supplies and my mat and all that and just do it in my hands. And it's just too messy. It's either not enough ink or it's way too much ink. It's just harder to control it that way. So I just grabbed my dauber. I do keep a bunch of these. I tried to reuse them if I can, but I couldn't. I had to use a new one because I couldn't find one that seemed to have that color on it already. So the dauber just gives me a little bit more control. So I was kind of wondering if I could just get rid of my daubers and use the brushes instead. But I think for these little purposes, it's nice to keep a handful of daubers on hand. So now I have my little ledge up there. I just had to redo the yellow ledge. I'm putting my roller date stamp. It says October 1st, 2024. I think it might have actually been September, but that's okay. In the grand scheme of things, the exact date doesn't really matter. I made a promise to myself that I would use washi tape on every single layout, and I'm just realizing that the one I did after this did not have washi tape on it, so I might have to add some washi tape when I do my recap for the month. But anyhow, I decided to use this black floral washi tape that came in the kit. And I used it. I put it in two different places in my layers, and then I also am putting it up here layered underneath of my little ledge here. It took me a surprisingly large amount of time to figure out the placement of my ledge and the washi tape, as you could see. I wanted there to be a little bit of space above the plants, but not too much space above the plants. So that's why it took me so long. I am using the Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive on these plants because it's just a little bit easier to use them that way because they're self-adhesive. I'm going to trim off the edge of my ledge, and now this page is coming together pretty well. The final details are just to sprinkle a little bit of confetti mix in 3 different places here across a diagonal across the page. And these confetti pieces, I just dumped them. As you can see, I just sprinkled them straight out of the package. I did that because I wanted it to look similar to how the soil looks, kind of all spilled out over the table. And so this confetti mix is absolutely gorgeous. It has some matted gold pieces in it. It has some cream. It has 2 different shades of chartreuse, a dark and a light. And it also has these cute little coral dimensional flowers. And so I'm using all of those different elements. Sometimes I'll pick out different elements that work better for the page and use only those. But in this case, I'm using the entire sequin mix. MTK kits always come with 2 teaspoons of confetti mix in them. We typically include sequins that don't have holes in them because I find them easier to work with. Sometimes, if I can't get the color that I'm looking for, the sequins will have holes in them. But for the most part, it's the holeless sequins, which I really love working with. Now that most of the page is done, I'm just looking at this set of stickers and feeling like I'd like to add a little something here. I love this plant. I actually have a plant very similar to that in my house, so I wanted to put that in there. And I also want to put another sticker over here on the other side just to balance it, but I didn't want to put another plant. It just looked like a little bit too themey with another plant, so I put a little floral element there. Now, I don't love that plant just hanging there in nowhere. Like it looks like it's kind of floating. It doesn't have a floor or anything to anchor it. So I'm just looking at the other stickers. I could have put a little phrase sticker there, but none of the phrases really made sense. So this is a printable that I provide to my tiaras over on Patreon every month. Every month there's a different one, and it's always designed to coordinate with the kit. But of course you can use it on its own. A lot of my patrons are not kit subscribers, but I think that they also enjoy getting these cut aparts because they're really pretty versatile. They're usually more seasonal than anything else. So this one, this little piece says Chaos Lives Here. And I just glued that. I put a little bit of dimensional adhesive on one side of it because it's extending across a bunch of different layers. So I wanted it to lay flat. I added a little bit of a fishtail banner ending on it, just on the part that goes over the photo. And that just covers the bottom of the plant. It makes it look just a little bit less floaty. Now I'm going to pull up the edges of the scallop border here. And at this point, I was thinking I might be done. I was thinking this one, maybe it's okay to not have a title. So I'm showing it because I think I'm finished with this process video. And I'm actually going to pull out a couple of photos and think about what I might want to scrapbook next. And so in the next video on my channel, you will see me scrapping one of those other photos. But then I decided to come back to this one. And I also forgot that I have these puffy stickers. So I thought about putting those on somewhere or using one or some of them somewhere. And then I thought I'd like to use these letter stickers. The coral colored ones came in the main kit, and then the black, they look like typewriter keys. They're a beautiful puffy letter sticker. They're so wonderful to work with. Those ones came in the embellishment add-on. So I'm using my thicker alignment tool here to spell out the word cat because I want to call this one Catastrophe. And I want cat to be separate because it's a bit of a pun, right? Because it's the cat who created it. And then I want to use a combination of those coral letters and also these black typewriter letters from Maggie Holmes. And these black typewriter letters, I can't say enough good things about them. I love them so much. And they're such a nice, like neutral, they would go with almost any layout, and they're just so smooth and silky and pliable. You can move them if you made a mistake. I'm spelling out the word catastrophe in a stacked kind of a way. I don't often do this because I have this thing where I like words and titles to be obvious and jump out at you instead of having to make the viewer work hard to figure out what this layout even says. But from a design perspective, I really like it like this. And I did not like the word catastrophe is very long. And I didn't really have a good place for a horizontal long word title. And I also didn't want to turn it on its side and make it be vertical either. There's already too much vertical stuff going on this one. So I decided to layer it like this and kind of stack the second half of the word or the second part of the word catastrophe. It just so happened that there were 8 letters left, so I could easily stack 4 and 4. I'm just using my Sharpie pen to hand draw a little apostrophe. And now I'm using my Sharpie pen to outline the outside edges of the letters in the word cat, which will help the word cat to stand out from the background because it's a very similar color to the background, but it also pulls some black into that part of the title so that it's not so unbalanced with, this very light cat and then very dark astrophe. So that I think helps balance out the title a little bit as well. In one of my previous layouts, I used a really thick outlining technique, and if you'd like to see that, make sure you check out the playlist at the end or somewhere in this video. I have a playlist for each of our kits, and so that would be somewhere in the Happy Home playlist if you're looking for it. But it's another great idea for outlining letters. So before we jump into the final photos, I want to give a quick shout out to my amazing Patreon supporters. These folks who are about to show up on your screen, they truly help make this channel happen, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of them. Tiaras get early, ad-free access to all of my process videos, plus real-time unedited versions of my videos, often in the form of live streams. They can watch it live or they can watch it later. They also get exclusive behind-the-scenes content from my craft room and process, along with sneak peeks into the Kit Club. And a big thank you to you for watching all the way to the end. Here are the photos of this one. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, I'm Mercy Tiara, also known as Tracy, and I love sharing my full creative process with you, including all the little decisions and lessons learned along the way. Be sure to check out the links at the end of this video to dive into my collection of process videos. I hope you enjoyed this page, and as always, stay tuned for more scrappy inspiration. Here are some of the places you can find me. Until next time, take care and have a really great scrappy week.